Hey Divine Feminines, this is Susan here. How are you all doing today? Before we begin, I just want to say how grateful I am that you're here with me again, sharing this space and this journey together. In today's video, we're going to talk about a moment in the twin flame journey that many Divine Feminines eventually experience, but very few truly expect. The moment when the Divine Feminine stops chasing the Divine Masculine's attention. We're going to explore what really begins to happen energetically and emotionally when the Divine Feminine shifts her focus back to herself, and why this moment can create such a powerful turning point inside the Divine Masculine. Because sometimes the moment you finally choose yourself is the moment something begins to awaken within him. So let's talk about it. Divine Feminine, there comes a moment in the twin flame journey that the Divine Masculine never truly expects. The moment when the Divine Feminine stops chasing his attention. For a long time, he may have felt your energy around him, your presence, your patience, your willingness to keep the connection alive, even when things felt uncertain. And because that energy was always there, he may have believed it would always remain the same. But one day, something changes. The Divine Feminine becomes quiet. She stops trying to reach him. She stops seeking answers. She stops placing her energy where it is not being received. And suddenly, the dynamic of the connection shifts. Let me ask you something, Divine Feminine. Have you ever noticed how the moment you truly begin focusing on yourself, something begins to move within him? Have you felt that strange shift in the energy when you finally stop chasing? Because what many Divine Masculines never expect is that the silence of the Divine Feminine can speak louder than any words. In this video, we are going to explore what truly happens inside the Divine Masculine when the Divine Feminine stops chasing his attention. Why this moment can create such a powerful emotional impact, and why this shift often becomes one of the most important turning points in the entire twin flame journey. Because sometimes, the moment she chooses herself is the moment he finally begins to feel what he almost lost. Divine Feminine. In many twin flame journeys, there comes a moment that changes the entire dynamic of the connection, not because of a dramatic conversation, not because of a clear decision made out loud, but because something inside the Divine Feminine begins to shift. For a long time, the energy of the connection may have been carried mostly by her. She may have been the one trying to understand the bond, trying to make sense of the emotions that appeared so suddenly and so deeply, trying to hold space for something that felt spiritually significant, even when the path between them seemed uncertain. During many stages of the journey, the Divine Feminine often keeps her attention focused on the connection. She reflects on it. She questions it. She tries to interpret every silence, every moment of distance, every small sign that might reveal what the Divine Masculine is feeling. Her energy remains present, even when communication fades, even when the Divine Masculine pulls away, even when the connection moves through cycles of closeness, followed by long periods of silence. Because when the Divine Feminine recognizes the depth of the bond, she often feels responsible for protecting it, for understanding it, for making sure it does not disappear. But over time, something begins to change inside her. not because the connection stops being meaningful, and not because the feelings suddenly vanish, but because she begins to understand something very important about her own spiritual journey. She begins to realize that constantly chasing someone's attention does not create alignment. It only drains her energy. At first, this realization may come slowly. It may begin through moments of exhaustion, moments where she feels that she has invested so much emotional energy into the connection without receiving the same clarity in return. Moments where she starts questioning whether continuing to chase answers is truly helping her grow. Gradually, the divine feminine begins to turn her focus inward. Instead of constantly observing the divine masculine's behavior, she begins to observe her own life again. She reconnects with her personal path, her own goals, her own emotional healing. She starts remembering who she is outside of the connection. And this moment is one of the most powerful turning points in the entire twin flame journey. Because when the divine feminine stops chasing, the energetic structure of the connection changes immediately. For a long time, the divine masculine may have felt her energy surrounding him. Her attention, her emotional presence, her willingness to keep the connection open even during uncertainty. Even if he did not consciously recognize it, that energy was still present. It created a familiar dynamic between them. But the moment the divine feminine pulls her energy back and directs it toward herself, something unexpected happens. The silence begins to feel different. The space between them begins to feel different, because the divine masculine is no longer receiving the same energetic attention he once felt. At first, he may not immediately understand what has changed. There may be no clear event that explains the shift. There may be no confrontation, no dramatic ending, but something feels unfamiliar. The connection begins to feel quieter. The emotional field around him begins to feel different. And when someone becomes accustomed to receiving attention, the absence of that attention can be surprisingly powerful. The divine masculine may begin to notice the silence in ways he never did before. He may begin to feel that something in the connection has shifted, not necessarily through words or actions, but through energy. Because the moment the divine feminine stops chasing is often the moment when the divine masculine begins to experience the connection from a completely different perspective. For the first time, he may begin to notice the space where her attention once existed, the emotional presence that once surrounded the connection, the energy that he may have unknowingly relied on. And this realization can begin a deeper internal process inside him, a process he never expected. Because what happens within the divine masculine when the divine feminine finally stops chasing his attention is not simply about distance. It is about awareness. It is about recognizing something that was once taken for granted. And as this realization slowly begins to form inside him, something deeper begins to awaken. Because the absence of her energy can create a silence that forces him to face emotions he may have avoided for a very long time. Divine feminine. When the divine feminine stops chasing the attention of the divine masculine, the shift that follows is often something he never truly anticipated. For a long time, he may have become accustomed to the presence of her energy, even if he never openly acknowledged it. even if he never consciously realized how much her attention influenced the emotional field between them. Her presence may have felt constant, her curiosity about the connection, her willingness to understand him, her emotional openness toward what existed between them. Even during moments when he distanced himself, there was often still a quiet sense that she remained energetically present. The divine feminine might not always have been speaking to him directly, but her attention was still there, her thoughts, her emotional investment, her desire to understand the connection. And over time, the divine masculine can grow used to that dynamic, not necessarily in a manipulative way, but in a way that feels familiar and stable. Her energy becomes part of the background of the connection, something that exists almost like a constant presence, something that continues to reach toward him even when he is uncertain about how to respond. Because in many twin flame dynamics, the divine masculine may take longer to process the depth of what he is feeling. While the divine feminine often begins her awakening earlier, he may still be navigating confusion, emotional resistance, or the instinct to maintain distance. During those stages, he may not fully understand the depth of the bond. He may not yet see the connection in the same way she does. And because of that, he may not expect the dynamic to change. From his perspective, the energy of the connection may appear stable. He may believe that her attention will continue to remain present in the same way. But when the divine feminine finally redirects her energy back toward herself, the shift that occurs can feel surprising to him, because suddenly something that once felt constant is no longer there. The emotional attention that once flowed toward him becomes quieter. The energetic presence that once surrounded the connection begins to move in a different direction. At first, the divine masculine may not immediately understand what has happened. He may simply feel that something about the connection has become unfamiliar. The dynamic feels different. The emotional field between them feels quieter. But the reason this moment can be so powerful is because the absence of attention often creates awareness. When someone becomes used to a certain form of energy being present, its disappearance can suddenly highlight how important that energy actually was. The divine masculine may begin to notice the silence. He may begin to feel the absence of the attention that once reached toward him. And that absence can trigger questions he never asked himself before. Why does the connection suddenly feel different? Why does the energy feel quieter? Why does the emotional space between them feel unfamiliar? These questions can begin to stir something deeper within him. Because when the divine feminine stops chasing, the connection stops revolving around his responses. Instead, the focus of the energy shifts. And this shift can create a moment of reflection for the divine masculine. A moment where he begins to recognize something he had not fully seen before. The emotional presence that once existed between them. The attention that once surrounded him. The connection that may have quietly influenced his inner world, even during moments of distance. At first, he may not immediately understand what he is feeling. But the absence of her attention can slowly bring certain emotions to the surface. Curiosity, confusion, reflection, because sometimes the moment when someone's energy disappears is the moment when its value becomes visible. And this is where something unexpected begins to happen inside the divine masculine. The silence created by the divine feminine's detachment can begin to awaken emotions he was not prepared to confront. Divine feminine. When the divine feminine finally stops chasing the attention of the divine masculine, one of the first things that begins to emerge in the connection is something many people underestimate: silence. Not the ordinary kind of silence that comes from distance or lack of communication, but a deeper energetic silence that the divine masculine begins to feel once the dynamic of the connection changes. For a long time, even when the divine masculine pulled away or created emotional distance, the energy of the divine feminine was still present in some way. Her attention was still directed toward the connection. Her thoughts often circled around him. Her emotional field was still reaching toward the bond that existed between them. Even if he was not consciously aware of it, that energetic presence was still part of the dynamic. It created a subtle emotional current that continued to flow between them. The divine masculine may not have fully recognized it, but he could still feel its influence. It was part of the energetic structure of the connection. But the moment the divine feminine truly begins to detach, something changes in that structure. Her energy begins to move inward. Her attention begins returning to herself. Her emotional focus shifts away from trying to maintain the connection and instead toward her own growth, healing, and life path. And when this happens, the energetic current between them changes. The space that once carried her attention begins to feel quieter. At first, the divine masculine may not consciously understand why the connection suddenly feels different. There may be no obvious external change. Perhaps there is no dramatic conversation, no confrontation, no final message explaining what has shifted. But something feels unfamiliar. The emotional atmosphere around the connection becomes quieter than before, and this silence can feel strange to someone who has grown accustomed to a certain level of energetic attention. Because when attention disappears, it often leaves behind a space that invites reflection. The divine masculine may begin to notice that something about the connection feels less predictable, less reactive, less emotionally charged in the way it once was. The dynamic that once revolved around moments of pursuit and withdrawal begins to fade, and in its place, a stillness begins to appear. This stillness can be uncomfortable at first because silence removes distraction. Without the familiar dynamic of the divine feminine reaching toward him, the divine masculine is left alone with his own thoughts about the connection. He may begin to remember moments they shared. Conversations that once seemed simple may start to feel meaningful. Memories that once seemed distant may begin to surface again. The absence of her attention creates a quiet space where those reflections can emerge. And in that quiet space, certain emotions may begin to appear. Curiosity, uncertainty, even a subtle sense of missing something that once felt familiar. The divine masculine may start to feel that the connection is no longer functioning in the same way it once did. The energy feels different. The emotional landscape between them has shifted. And because he did not expect this change, the silence can feel more powerful than words. Because sometimes silence has a way of revealing truths that were previously hidden beneath constant movement and reaction. Without the familiar presence of the divine feminine's attention, the divine masculine begins to experience the connection in a different way. Instead of reacting to her energy, he begins to observe his own internal response to the absence of that energy. And that observation can slowly awaken a deeper level of awareness inside him. Because when silence appears where attention once existed, it often creates the space for realization. And that realization can lead the divine masculine to begin noticing something else he never fully considered before: the impact of her energy when it was still focused on him. Divine feminine. One of the most powerful shifts that happens in the twin flame journey occurs when the divine feminine truly redirects her energy back toward herself, not as a strategy, not as a way to provoke a reaction, but as a natural result of her own inner growth. For a long time, the divine feminine's attention may have been deeply connected to the divine masculine. Her thoughts may have often returned to the connection. She may have wondered what he was feeling, what he was thinking, whether he was beginning to understand the depth of what existed between them. Her emotional awareness remained connected to him even during moments of distance. But eventually, something changes inside her. Through her own healing and reflection, she begins to understand that constantly focusing on someone else's actions does not bring peace. It keeps her energy tied to uncertainty. So she begins to shift that focus. She reconnects with her own life, her own growth, her own emotional balance. Instead of directing her attention toward what the divine masculine is doing, she begins investing that same energy in herself. And this moment creates one of the most significant, energetic shifts in the entire twin flame dynamic. Because when her energy is no longer focused on him, the divine masculine begins to experience something very unfamiliar. For a long time, her attention may have existed as a subtle but constant presence in the connection. Even if he was not consciously aware of it, that energetic focus was still part of the dynamic between them. It created a certain emotional atmosphere, a sense that the connection was still being held in some way. But when the divine feminine redirects that energy back toward herself, the dynamic begins to change. The divine masculine may begin to feel that something in the connection has shifted. The emotional field feels different. The energetic flow between them feels quieter, because the attention that once moved toward him is no longer directed in the same way. At first, he may not understand what is happening. He may simply feel that the connection has become less predictable, less emotionally reactive. The familiar dynamic where the divine feminine continued to hold space for the bond begins to disappear. And this can create a subtle sense of imbalance for the divine masculine. Because when someone becomes used to receiving a certain level of attention, the absence of that attention can be surprisingly noticeable. The emotional space that once surrounded him begins to feel emptier, not necessarily in a negative way, but in a way that highlights what once existed. The divine masculine may begin to sense that the energy of the connection has become more neutral, more still, less centered around him. And this realization can begin to trigger something inside his awareness. Because when attention shifts away from someone, it often creates the opportunity for that person to finally observe the connection from a different perspective. Without the familiar energy of the divine feminine reaching toward him, the divine masculine begins to experience the connection in a quieter and more reflective way. He may begin to notice how often her presence existed in his emotional landscape before, how frequently her attention surrounded the connection, and how different the dynamic now feels without it. This shift can create moments of introspection, moments where he begins to question what the connection truly meant, moments where he starts recognizing that the energy between them is not functioning in the same way it once did. And sometimes it is precisely this absence of attention that allows the divine masculine to begin noticing emotions he previously avoided. Because when the familiar dynamic disappears, the mind begins searching for meaning. And that search can bring deeper emotions to the surface, emotions he may not have expected to confront. Divine feminine. When the divine feminine truly stops chasing the attention of the divine masculine, the shift that follows is not only energetic, it also begins to create an emotional impact inside him that he did not anticipate. For a long time, the connection may have existed in a dynamic where the divine masculine felt a certain emotional distance. Even if the bond was intense, he may have believed he still had control over how deeply he allowed himself to engage with it. He could step back when things felt overwhelming. He could focus on other areas of his life. He could create emotional space whenever the connections seemed too complex or too intense to process. And during those moments, the divine feminine's energy was often still present. Her attention remained connected to the bond. Her emotional awareness still surrounded the connection. But when she stops chasing, the emotional structure that once allowed the divine masculine to maintain that distance begins to change. Because now the energy that once reached toward him is no longer there to stabilize the dynamic. The emotional field between them becomes quieter, more neutral, and this is often when the divine masculine begins to experience something he did not expect. Awareness. Without the familiar dynamic of the divine feminine's attention surrounding him, he begins to notice the connection in a different way. He may start to realize that the emotional space between them feels unfamiliar. The silence feels different. The absence of her attention begins to highlight the role her energy once played in the connection. And this realization can begin to create subtle, emotional reactions inside him. At first, these reactions may appear as curiosity. He may begin wondering why the connection suddenly feels different, why the emotional dynamic has shifted, why the presence he once felt around the bond now seems quieter. As these reflections deepen, other emotions can begin to surface. The divine masculine may begin revisiting memories of the connection. Moments that once seemed simple may begin to feel meaningful. Conversations that once seemed ordinary may begin to carry emotional weight. He may begin to recognize that the connection touched parts of him that very few people ever reached. Parts related to vulnerability, parts connected to emotional truth, parts of his inner world that had long remained protected. And when these realizations begin to emerge, the emotional impact can become difficult to ignore, because the absence of the divine feminine's attention creates space for something new to appear. Reflection. Without the familiar energetic dynamic surrounding him, the divine masculine begins to experience the connection in a quieter and more introspective way. He begins to see the bond not only through the lens of distance or confusion, but through the lens of its emotional significance. And sometimes this is the moment when something unexpected begins to happen. The divine masculine may begin to feel the absence of her energy, not as rejection, but as a silence that reveals how important her presence once was. Because when someone's attention disappears, it often reveals how much that attention once influenced the connection. The divine masculine may begin to notice that something about the emotional atmosphere has changed, and that change can bring deeper awareness. Awareness of the connection, awareness of the impact it had on him, awareness of emotions he may have avoided confronting before. This emotional impact is often one of the first true internal shifts that occur after the divine feminine detaches. Because when her attention is no longer directed toward him, the divine masculine begins to face the connection from a place of personal reflection rather than reaction. And this reflection can begin awakening something deeper inside him, a process that goes beyond simple curiosity, a process connected to his own spiritual awakening, divine feminine. When the divine feminine stops chasing the attention of the divine masculine and truly redirects her energy toward herself, the shift that occurs in the connection does more than change the dynamic between two people. It begins to awaken something deeper inside the divine masculine, something he may not have expected, something that had been slowly building beneath the surface of the journey all along. For much of the twin flame path, the divine masculine may move through phases of emotional resistance, not because the connection is meaningless to him, but because its intensity can feel overwhelming. The bond touches parts of his emotional world that may have remained protected for a long time, parts connected to vulnerability, parts connected to emotional honesty, parts connected to the deeper layers of the soul. And when those layers begin to open, the instinctive response is sometimes to retreat, to create distance, to regain control over emotions that suddenly feel unfamiliar. But when the divine feminine stops chasing and begins focusing on her own life, something important happens to that dynamic. The energetic pressure of the connection changes. Instead of reacting to her presence, the divine masculine begins to experience something quieter, something more reflective. The absence of her attention creates a new emotional environment, one that invites introspection, and within that space, something inside him begins to awaken. At first, it may appear as subtle awareness, a growing recognition that the connection meant more than he previously allowed himself to admit. He may begin reflecting on moments from the past. Memories that once seemed simple may begin to reveal deeper meaning. Conversations may return to his mind in unexpected ways. Moments of eye contact, moments of emotional openness, moments when he sensed that something unique existed between them. These reflections may not happen all at once. They may appear gradually during quiet moments, moments when he is alone with his thoughts, moments when the absence of the divine feminine's attention becomes more noticeable. And as these reflections deepen, the divine masculine may begin to realize something important. The connection was never as simple as he once believed. It touched parts of his inner world that he rarely allowed others to reach. It awakened emotions that challenged the identity he had built over the years, and it revealed aspects of his own emotional truth that he had not fully explored before. This realization can begin to trigger an awakening process, not necessarily in a dramatic or sudden way, but in a quiet, gradual unfolding. The divine masculine may begin questioning things he once took for granted: his understanding of relationships, his beliefs about vulnerability, his perception of emotional connection. He may begin recognizing that the experience with the divine feminine changed him in ways he did not fully understand at the time. Even during the periods of distance, even when communication was limited, the connection continued influencing his inner growth. And as this awareness grows stronger, the divine masculine may begin to see the entire journey from a new perspective. What once felt confusing may begin to make sense. What once felt overwhelming may begin to reveal its purpose. He may begin understanding that the connection did not appear in his life by accident. It appeared at a moment when his soul was ready to evolve, ready to confront emotional patterns that had remained hidden, ready to explore a deeper level of authenticity. And when this awakening process begins, it often changes the way he perceives the divine feminine as well, because he starts to recognize that her presence in his life was not random. She played a role in triggering this transformation. She reflected aspects of himself that were waiting to be acknowledged. And once this awareness begins to form inside him, another shift naturally follows. The way he sees the connection begins to change. What once seemed complicated may begin to appear meaningful. What once seemed overwhelming may begin to reveal a deeper purpose. Divine feminine. One of the most misunderstood moments in the twin flame journey is the moment when the divine feminine finally detaches. From the outside, detachment can sometimes appear like distance. It can look like the divine feminine has stopped caring about the connection. It may even seem as though she has simply moved on. But true detachment in the twin flame journey is not about rejection. It is about alignment. It is the moment when the divine feminine stops placing her emotional energy into chasing answers, chasing attention, or chasing clarity from the divine masculine. Instead, she returns that energy to herself. She begins focusing on her own growth, her own healing, her own spiritual path. And this shift does something very powerful to the dynamic of the connection, because for a long time, the relationship between the divine feminine and the divine masculine may have operated within a familiar energetic pattern. The divine feminine seeking understanding, the divine masculine navigating confusion or emotional resistance, the dynamic moving between moments of closeness and periods of distance. But when the divine feminine detaches, that familiar pattern begins to dissolve. The connection no longer revolves around pursuit and withdrawal. The emotional structure that once defined the dynamic begins to change. And this change can be deeply felt by the divine masculine. Because when someone who once directed a great amount of attention toward the connection suddenly redirects that energy inward, the energetic balance shifts. The connection becomes quieter, more neutral, less emotionally reactive. For the divine masculine, this can feel unfamiliar. The dynamic that once allowed him to respond at his own pace begins to transform, because now the connection is no longer centered around his reactions. Instead, it begins to exist in a more balanced, energetic space. The divine feminine is no longer waiting for clarity. She is no longer seeking validation. She is no longer directing her emotional awareness toward what he is doing. Instead, she is building her own stability, her own emotional alignment, her own spiritual evolution. And when this happens, the energy she radiates begins to change. She becomes calmer, more centered, more connected to her own purpose. Her presence no longer carries the urgency that once surrounded the connection. Instead, it carries a quiet strength, a sense of self-respect, a sense of emotional balance. This shift can be deeply felt by the divine masculine, even if he cannot immediately explain it, because the connection now exists in a different energetic environment. The familiar pattern of pursuit and retreat is no longer active. And when that pattern disappears, the divine masculine begins experiencing the connection in a new way. Instead of reacting to the energy of pursuit, he begins to observe the connection from a place of reflection. The absence of pressure creates space. Space where he can begin recognizing the emotional significance of the bond. Space where he can begin processing feelings he may have avoided confronting before. And this is why detachment is such a powerful turning point in the twin flame journey. Not because it forces change, but because it removes the patterns that once prevented deeper awareness from emerging. When the divine feminine detaches, the connection stops revolving around emotional reaction. Instead, it begins evolving through personal growth. Her growth, his growth, and the new awareness that begins to form between them. Because when detachment happens from a place of self-alignment, rather than emotional withdrawal, the entire energetic dynamic of the connection transforms. And that transformation often marks the beginning of a completely new phase in the twin flame journey. A phase where the connection is no longer defined by confusion or emotional imbalance, but by awareness, divine feminine. When the divine feminine finally stops chasing the attention of the divine masculine and fully returns her energy to herself, something profound begins to unfold in the twin flame journey. A new phase begins. Not necessarily because the two people suddenly come back together, but because the energetic foundation of the connection has changed. For a long time, the journey may have been shaped by imbalance, the divine feminine searching for clarity, trying to understand the bond, trying to hold the connection together through emotional effort and spiritual awareness. Meanwhile, the divine masculine may have moved through his own process more slowly, navigating confusion, trying to understand emotions that felt deeper than anything he had experienced before. And because both souls were evolving at different speeds, the connection often moved through cycles. Moments of closeness followed by distance, moments of recognition followed by silence, moments where the energy between them felt powerful but unstable. All of these phases served a purpose. They pushed both souls toward growth. They revealed emotional patterns that needed healing. They challenged both the divine feminine and the divine masculine to look deeper within themselves. But when the divine feminine reaches the point of true detachment, the journey begins to enter a new stage, because she is no longer directing her energy toward chasing the connection. She is directing it toward her own alignment, her own life path, her own spiritual evolution. And when this happens, the energy she carries becomes very different. Instead of urgency, there is calm. Instead of emotional pursuit, there is balance. Instead of waiting for someone else to respond, there is a deep sense of self-respect and inner stability. The divine feminine begins living her life fully again. She reconnects with her passions, her personal growth, her sense of purpose. The connection no longer defines her emotional state. Instead, it becomes simply one part of a much larger journey of self-discovery. And this shift can create something powerful within the energetic field between both souls. Because the divine masculine begins to experience the connection without the familiar dynamic that once surrounded it. The absence of pursuit creates space for awareness, space for reflection, space for emotions that may have been hidden beneath layers of confusion or resistance. The divine masculine may begin to notice that the connection feels different now, quieter, more stable, less reactive. And in that quiet space, something new can emerge. A deeper understanding of what the connection truly represents. He may begin to see the journey not as something that complicated his life, but as something that transformed him. He may begin recognizing how the presence of the divine feminine influenced his emotional growth, how the connection awakened parts of his inner world that had long remained untouched. And as this awareness grows, the connection begins to exist on a new energetic level, no longer driven by pursuit and withdrawal, no longer shaped by confusion and emotional imbalance. Instead, it becomes a space where two evolving souls may begin to recognize each other again from a place of greater consciousness. This does not mean the journey becomes instantly perfect, but it does mean that the foundation of the connection has changed. Both souls have grown. Both have faced their own inner transformations, and the energy between them now carries a different frequency, one rooted in awareness rather than reaction. Because sometimes the most powerful moment in the twin flame journey is not when someone chases harder. It is when someone finally chooses themselves. And when the divine feminine reaches that point of self-alignment, something remarkable begins to happen. The connection is no longer driven by need. It begins to move through truth. And sometimes, that is exactly the moment when everything that once seemed distant begins to find its way back into alignment.